Well, hello, it's Miss Gina, and you're at Gina's Planet, and I'm so glad you're here. I thought we could read Ratatouille, a junior novelization, and we left off on chapter 10. We're on chapter 10. And remember, there was a surprise kiss last time. Let's see what happens. So, let's just dive right in. For a man who ate food for a living, Anton Ego was incredibly thin. Some might even have described him as cadaverous. It's tickling my nose. He sat in his antique-filled office, poised over an ancient typewriter. The door opened, and his assistant, Ambrister Minion, entered. "What is it, Ambrister?" Ego asked. "Gusto's," Minion said. "It's come back. It's popular." It's popular. "I haven't reviewed Gusto's in years," Ego said in disbelief. "No, sir," said Minion. Ego pulled open his files and deftly flipped through the folders. "My last review condemned it to the tourist trade," he said. "Yes, sir," said Minion. Ego pulled out his review and began to read. "I said, Gusto has finally found his rightful place in history, right along an equally famous chef, Monsieur Boyardee." Chef Boyardee. Uh-oh. "Touché," said Minion. Rising from his desk, Ego moved menacingly toward Minion. "That is where I left it. That was my last word." "The last word." "Yes," said Minion. "Then tell me, Ambrister," said Ego, leaning toward his assistant, "how could it be popular?" How could it be popular? How could it be popular? Says it right there. Back at Gusto's, Skinner had just gotten some bad news from his lawyer. Some very bad news. "No, no, no," he groaned. "The DNA matches," said Talon calmly, sipping a strong espresso. "The timing works. Everything checks out. He is Gusto's son." "This can't just happen," whined Skinner. "The whole thing is a setup. The boy knows." He walked to his office window and stared out at the bumbling Linguini. "Look at him out there, pretending to be an idiot. He's toying with my mind like a cat with a ball or something." "String," suggested Talon. "Yes," cried Skinner, playing dumb, "taunting me with that rat." "Rat?" asked Talon. Skinner went on and on with his rat theory. The rat was part of a plot Linguini had hatched to make Skinner think he was crazy. Apparently, it was working. "The deadline passes in 3 days. 1, 2, 3, said Talon, closing his briefcase. "Then you can fire him whenever he ceases to be valuable, and no one will ever know." He pulled on his coat, then paused at the door. "I worried about the hair samples you gave me. I had to send them back to the lab." "Why?" asked Skinner. "Because the first time they came back identified as rodent hair." Talon said with a shrug. "Rodent hair?" Skinner nearly fell over. The kiss might have saved Remy momentarily, but now he was paying for it. Linguini was officially head over heels for Colette, and Remy suddenly had no control over him. No amount of hair tugs could get Linguini to do his bidding. In the middle of a recipe, Remy had Linguini grab a certain spice he needed. "No, no, no," Colette said. handing him a different one. "Try this, it's better." Linguini smiled and reached for it. Horrified, Remy pulled his hair, trying to keep control. But Linguini overrode Remy's command and took the spice. The next morning, Remy made his way down the alley towards Gusto's. There he discovered his brother and a bunch of his friends. They were hungry and looking for food. Remy was angry, but then he softened. He'd get them food, but just this once. Inside, he discovered that the food safe was locked. He'd have to find the key in Skinner's office. Remy was pretty sure he knew where the key was. After a lot of effort, he managed to open a desk drawer and began to rummage through its contents. Remy stared in disbelief, for the key was hidden under a file labeled Gusto. Last Will and Testament. Remy turned to Gusto's portrait that hung in the office. "Your will!" he exclaimed. Remy pulled open the file and discovered its startling contents. Gusto's will. Recent press clippings about the restaurants featuring Linguini and an envelope with Linguini's mother's return address in the corner. "Mind if I?" he asked the portrait, indicating the letter. "Not at all," Gusto replied, his portrait suddenly coming to life. "Linguini." "Why would Linguini be filed with your will?" Remy asked. "This used to be my office," Gusto said. Remy pulled the letter from the envelope and read it without saying a word. Then he read the will. Then he read the letter again, his eyes wide with amazement. "He's your son?" Remy squealed. He didn't squeal. He squeaked. "I have a son?" Gusto was flabbergasted. "How could you not know this?" asked Remy. "I am a figment of your imagination," argued Gusto. "You did not know? How could I?" "Well, your son is the rightful owner of this restaurant," said Remy. At that moment, Skinner walked into his office. He froze in his tracks, stunned by a bizarre sight of a rat sitting on his desk, reading his personal mail. Remy snatched the letter and the will in his mouth and made a run for it. "No, no!" screamed Skinner. "The rat! It's ah!" Remy raced outside. Skinner burst out the back door. Excuse me, my nose itchy. Back door and pushed Lalo, who had just arrived, off his scooter. Skinner jumped onto the moped and took off in hot pursuit. He and Remy dodged traffic, racing through the Parisian streets. It was inevitable for a man on a scooter to outrun a small rodent. Skinner reached down to snatch the documents from Remy when the rat suddenly stopped. Skinner's scooter plunged down a flight of steps and crashed into a heap at the bottom. Skinner screamed in frustration. "Ah!" He glanced up to see Remy looking down at him from the walkway, the document still clutched in his mouth. Remy laughed with delight. Unfortunately, a gust from a passing bus swept the wheel away from Remy. The wheel floated high in the air, then fluttered over the river's edge. Skinner saw his chance. He climbed back aboard the moped and took off after the fluttering papers. Remy chased the wheel from above and the letter still in his mouth. The wheel began to float down, heading right towards Skinner's grasping fingers. That was when Remy made two amazing, desperate leaps, one from the railing to the tree and the other from the tree to the floating wheel, which he plucked out of midair. Skinner watched in shock as Remy landed on the canvas roof of a passing riverboat. Skinner kept onto the deck of the riverboat. Remy documents clenched carefully in his teeth, jumped to another passing boat. Skinner followed. Remy jumped from boat to boat, and finally they were stuck on the same one. The next possible boat, a dining boat, was too far away for Remy to reach. Skinner laughed. The wheel was his, but Remy made the impossible leap anyway. The documents caught the wind, allowing Remy to land safely on the boat's deck. Skinner jumped after him, but he was not so lucky. He landed in the middle of the Seine River. The middle of the Seine. An hour later, Skinner returned to his office. He was soaked and furious. He became even angrier when he discovered Linguini sitting at his desk. "You," Skinner spluttered. "Get out of my office." "He's not in your office," said Colette. "You are in his." She held up Gusteau's wheel. Skinner gasped in disbelief. That rodent. Linguini was the toast of the town. Journalists swarmed Gusteau's for a press conference. They all wanted a photo of the rising chef and a quote or two for the next morning's edition. "Chef Linguini," a reporter said, "your rise has been meteoric. Yet you have no formal training. What is the secret to your genius?" "Secret," said Linguini. "You want the truth?" Remy smiled and smoothed down his fur. He was finally ready for his big moment. But Linguini didn't lift his hat and present Remy to the press. Instead, he said, "I am Gusteau's son. It's in my blood, I guess." Remy was disappointed, and his frustration with Linguini only grew as Linguini fielded question after question from the reporters and never once mentioned Remy. Linguini was cocky, sure of himself. He was no longer just the garbage boy. Remy pulled angrily on Linguini's hair. Finally, Linguini took off his chef's hat with Remy inside and placed it on a nearby table. He didn't want Remy to distract him anymore. Across the street from Gusteau's, a nervous, unshaven Skinner, dressed in a tattered trench coat, stepped into a phone booth. From the corner of his eye, he could see the line of customers that snaked around the block. The phone rang in the drab and cluttered Ministry of Health office. "Health Inspector?" "Nader Lassard, turning from a pile of paperwork. I wish to report a rat infestation," Skinner said in a low voice. "He's taken over my Gusteau's restaurant." "Gusteau's, eh?" said Lassard. "I can drop by." He opened his date book. "The first opening is in 3 months." Skinner nearly dropped the receiver. It must happen now. "It's a gourmet restaurant," Lassard sighed. "Monsieur, I have the information. If someone cancels, I'll slot you in." But the rat, you must." Lassard hung up. Skinner listened blankly to the dial tone. Back in the kitchen of Gusteau's, the chefs were steaming mad, that is. Horst looked at the clock, scowled, and turned to Colette. "It's past opening time," he said. "He should have been finished an hour ago." Colette replied with an annoyed sigh. Suddenly, the front door at the dining room swung open, revealing a tall, thin, forbidding man. It was Anton Ego. The press gasped. "You are Monsieur Linguini?" asked Ego. "Hello," said Linguini, terrified. "Pardon me for interrupting your premature celebration," said Ego. "But I thought it was only fair to give you a sporting chance, as you are new to the game." "Game?" asked Linguini, puzzled. "Yes," said Ego. "And you've been playing without an opponent." which is, as you may have guessed, against the rules. The press furiously snapped and scribbled away. I will return tomorrow night with high expectations, Ego says solemnly. Pray you don't disappoint me. And with that, he turned and walked out of the restaurant. The press conference was over. Before Linguini returned to the kitchen, he took Remy into his office. You were distracting me in front of the press, he said, irritated. How am I supposed to concentrate with you yanking on my hair all the time? And that's another thing. Your opinion isn't the only one that matters here. Colette knows how to cook too, you know. But Remy, who was sitting on Linguini's head under his hat, was fed up. He grabbed Linguini's hair and pulled it as hard as he could. Ow, Linguini cried. All right, that's it. Linguini stormed outside. He got in Remy's face and said, You take a break, little chef. You cool off and get your mind right. Ego is coming and I need to focus. Meanwhile, Skinner was on the roof of the restaurant watching the whole scene. The rat is the cook, he said with a gasp. As Linguini headed back inside, Skinner ducked down the fire escape. Remy was furious at Linguini. He picked up a bottle and was about to throw it against the wall when he came face to face with Emile and a group of other rats. I'm sorry, Remy, Emile said. I know there are too many guys. I tried to limit. You know what? Remy interrupted. It's okay. Dinner's on me. We'll go after closing time. Tell Dad to bring the whole clan. That night, Linguini arrived at the fabulous new apartment. Hoping to find Remy, since Linguini was the new owner of Gusto's, it was goodbye hot plate, hello Eiffel Tower view. Little chef, he called. No answer. He went to Remy's bed, but it was empty. Linguini stared out the window, sadly. Was his friend gone for good? And that was page 101. And we'll read chapter 11 next time. Let's see. I think we only have 2 more chapters left of this book. So I hope you're enjoying it. And there's Remy there. Ratatouille, junior novelization. So I want you to read more in 2024 and remember to grow your brain. And I'll see you next time.